These are the most feared prison inmates in the world. Welcome back, Charlie here. Prison is a scary place. If you ever end up behind bars, you'd better hope you don't share a cell with any of these people. These criminals did unimaginable crimes both outside and inside prison. First, we have to look at Jason Barnum. This inmate looks absolutely terrifying. In 2015, this prison inmate went viral, not only for his crime, but also his very scary looks. In November 2015, Jason went on a crime spree. He began burglarizing many homes. He targeted many homes in Alaska. Of course, because of his distinctive looks, police knew who to look for. One night, Jason was staying at a motel in Alaska. That's when a cop recognized him and went to investigate. But that's when Jason took out a firearm and injured the cop. Eventually, Jason was hunted down and caught. He was found guilty of attempted murder, burglary, and other charges, and was sentenced to 22 years behind bars, meaning he won't be out of prison until he's 61 years old. Just imagine having to share a cell with this inmate. His face is covered in skull tattoos, and he's even tattooed his right eyeball. And at the top of Jason's head is a large skull tattoo. Jason has a very long criminal history. He has been in and out of prison since 1993, getting arrested in 1993, 1994, 2000, and 2005. Prison is a very scary place, but I think even behind bars, no one will mess with a guy who looks like this. Now we have to look at an even scarier criminal, one who will haunt your dreams forever. This is Joseph James DeAngelo, better known as the Golden State Killer. At one point, this man was the most feared criminal in the USA. His reign of terror spanned from 1974 to 1986. During those years, he burgled 120 people and ended 13 lives. Amazingly, he was only apprehended in 2018. Over all of those years, cops had no idea of his true identity. He was only discovered and arrested in 2018. This was after new DNA evidence emerged. He also taunted and threatened both victims and police. One of his victims even got away, and years later he would call her up. He would say down the phone, "I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you." Just imagine receiving that call. In August of 2020, DeAngelo was sentenced to life in prison. He is now 76, meaning he will never get out. At one point in time, he was even a cop himself, meaning that he knew how to evade law enforcement. It's scary to think that for many decades, this evil man was totally free. He is now locked away behind bars, but despite his old age, he is still very feared in prison. It's clear this man is a true psychopath with zero remorse for his crimes. Now we have to look at the most violent prisoner to ever live. Meet Charles Bronson. This man has spent most of his life behind bars, and most of his crimes actually took place in prison. When he was 22, he first went to prison for 7 years. This was for an armed robbery. It's inside this prison that he began his reign of terror. While in prison for the first time, he got into many fights. All of these were unprovoked and started by Bronson. He was transferred to another prison where he tried to poison a fellow inmate. He also tried to dig his way out and escape. He was then sent to a remote prison on the Isle of Wight, but moving him to an island did not help. He continued to be very violent and difficult behind bars. He was then transferred to various mental hospitals, but he would lash out every time and would have to be moved. He was actually a free man for a few years, but he soon reoffended. The issue was most prisons would refuse to take him in. He was basically too dangerous for any prison. Eventually a prison accepted him, but soon after that he took a prison librarian hostage. He demanded a helicopter, an inflatable doll, and a cup of tea. He was taken to solitary confinement after this, but he then took a prison guard hostage. After this, he had to be moved to what's known as a Hannibal cage. But he then took another prison worker hostage. He was then moved to another prison where he took 3 more people hostage. He was then moved to another prison where he took 2 more hostages, and also destroyed all of the furniture in his prison cell. It's safe to say he is the most violent prisoner on the planet. As of 2021, he's been held in HM Prison Wood Hill. This is a maximum security prison in Buckinghamshire. Next, we have to look at a Missouri prisoner dubbed the world's scariest perp. This is Michael Campbell. In 2021, he was arrested for trying to assault a woman. But Michael's criminal history began many years ago in 2003. Over the years, he's been arrested for assault, burglary, grand theft, and escape from custody. Over the years, it seems his look has got scarier and scarier. This is how he looked in 2003, and this is how he looked in 2008. This most recent mugshot is from 2021. The scary thing is, he tried to assault the woman while she slept in her own bed with her boyfriend. Just imagine waking up to this man in your bed. Thankfully, Michael Campbell now faces life behind bars. Let's hope this man is not let out of custody anytime soon. Moving on, we have to look at Grady Stiles. Grady Stiles' story is one of the most bizarre criminal tales you will ever hear. He was born in 1937 with a deformity. This made his fingers and toes fuse together to look like claws. Because of this, Grady joined the circus. He performed under the name Lobster Boy, and he actually got pretty popular and famous within the circus. Eventually, he got married to another carnival performer, but as he got older, he began getting more angry and drinking more. He was very mean to his wife, and his kids too, who were born with the same disease as him. In 1978, Grady's eldest daughter was about to get married, but on the eve of her wedding, Grady shot his daughter's fiancé, causing her fiancé to lose his life. He was taken to prison where he then threatened to take his wife's life too. But he never could, as Grady was given life behind bars. It's said because of his deformity, every inmate was very scared of Grady. He was also very violent to his fellow prison inmates. Grady passed away in prison in 1992. Finally, we have to look at the scariest prisoner in Japan. Japanese prisons are known for their brutality, but the scariest part about Japanese prison would be running into this man. This is Satomu Miyazaki. In just 1 year, he took 4 girls' lives. The girls ranged from age 4 to 7 years old. He would take them in his car. He would then take their lives and even eat them, preserving some of their body parts as trophies. To make things even scarier, he would taunt his victims' families. He would do this with phone calls, letters, and even photographs. Eventually, he was caught in the act by a father of 2 girls he was trying to abduct. The girl's father chased him on foot, but Satomu got away. Eventually, he was caught by police and taken to prison. He spent some time in a Japanese prison where he scared many other inmates, but was later given capital punishment in 2008. Today, he's regarded as one of the scariest criminals in Japanese history. The first criminal we'll look at is named Ah Fong. Surprisingly, she was an innocent-seeming teenage girl. She was recruited by the secretive Triad gang in Hong Kong. Her job was to lure victims into their trap. And in 1999, one of their victims was named Fan Man Yi. Fan Man Yi was captured one night by this gang in Hong Kong. The gang said that she owed them $20,000. The gang spent an entire month interrogating Fan Man Yi. But sadly, after 1 month, Fan's injuries meant that she passed away. The rest of the very evil gang simply moved on, except Ah Fong. Ah Fong, who had helped in the crime, began getting terrible nightmares. She kept seeing the ghost of Fan Man Yi. She was unable to sleep for days, and was absolutely traumatized by what had happened. Eventually, Ah Fong could not cope and she called the police. At first, the police did not believe her. They thought she was delusional or crazy. But then Ah Fong took the police to the crime scene, and there they discovered the remains of Fan Man Yi. She had been hidden inside a Hello Kitty mermaid doll. The 3 gang members involved were arrested and were sentenced to life in prison. And Ah Fong testified in exchange for immunity. Ah Fong's story is chilling, but an even scarier criminal is Jose Ferreira. This man is the epitome of evil. In 1982, when he was 17, he went to a party. That's when he met a 13-year-old named Carrie Ann Jopek. Jose gave her substances and tried to get her to go to the basement with him, But that's when Carrie said she didn't want to. Jose responded by saying, "You're going downstairs," and he then pushed Carrie down the stairs into the basement. But the fall broke Carrie's neck. Jose then did terrible things to Carrie. Jose then snuck her body out of the house and buried it under the neighbor's porch. After 17 months, Carrie was discovered, but police were baffled and there were no leads or witnesses. But during these 17 years, Jose was being tormented every night, according to him, by Carrie's spirit. He would have sleepless nights where he would just hear Carrie screaming. Eventually, Jose said he was driven insane. So after nearly 2 decades, he finally went to the police and confessed. Do you think this was Carrie's spirit calling out, trying to get revenge? Even though it took many years, justice was served, and Carrie's parents got to see her killer put behind bars. Now let's look at this criminal named Bhim Shankar Giri. Bhim was a happily married man from Mumbai, India. But he had a problem: his own brother. Bhim's brother would not stop harassing his wife. Bhim told his brother to stop countless times, but his brother would not stop. Bhim's hatred of his brother grew more and more, until one day he reached a tipping point. He then decided to take his brother's life. The police and Bhim's family had no idea what happened, but scarily, 1 week later, Bhim began hearing his brother's voice. Bhim's brother said he was going to haunt him and give him sleepless nights for the rest of his life. Every night, Bhim would have nightmares of his brother choking him. Eventually, it all became too much, and Bhim confessed to his family. Bhim's family called the police, and Bhim was sentenced to life in prison. Even though Bhim's brother was in the wrong, it does not excuse what Bhim did. But Bhim is nowhere near as evil as this man. This man is named Terry Childs. In 1985, this man took the life of 17-year-old Janine Segala. Terry was convicted and sentenced to 41 years in prison. But while he was in prison, he began confessing to more things he'd done. This included many lives he'd taken. In total, he confessed to taking 12 people's lives. But he was only ever convicted of 5 of these murders. In court, he made a very scary admission. He said he confessed because he was being haunted by his victims. He said his confession was a last-ditch effort to free himself from these ghosts. He said he would often see his victims in his cell staring at him, and had dreams of them eating his brain. After he confessed to the crimes, the ghosts disappeared. Maybe people who have their lives ended prematurely come back and get revenge from the afterlife. Something similar happened with criminal Mark Bridger. Mark Bridger was a very evil man from the UK. In 2012, Mark was driving around his local area. That's when he saw a young girl, 5-year-old April Jones. April Jones approached Mark's car, but that was the last time she was seen alive. At first, Mark said this was an accident, but police did not believe this for 1 second. And a later investigation found that Mark did this on purpose. Mark was sentenced to life in prison. But a few years later, one of Mark's fellow inmates was released from prison and disclosed something scary. He said that Mark would see visions of April Jones in his cell. Apparently, April's ghost torments Mark and gives him sleepless nights. Frankly, I don't feel sorry for him one bit. Now, let's look at the top 2 stories of criminals haunted by their victims. This is Adrian Dow. In 2010, he took the life of a woman named Jennifer Stewart. He did this in a parking lot in Ottawa, Canada. Because it was at night, there were no witnesses and police were stumped. For 3 years, the crime was unsolved and police had no leads. But one day, out of nowhere, a man named Adrian Dow confessed to police. At first, police did not believe Adrian. But after questioning, there were some things only the killer would know. And Adrian answered all of the questions correctly. But here's where it gets weird. When police asked Adrian why he did it, he said it was to launch his music career. He said, quote, "If I killed someone, I'd be a really good rapper, because people talk about killer stuff." But why did Adrian confess? Well, he said that after the incident, he would often see Jennifer's ghost. He said he saw Jennifer's ghost multiple times per day flying over him, and also standing over his bed at night. Now let's take a look at one more haunted criminal. In 2013, Victor Amawuga from Ghana got into a taxi, but that was when Victor took the taxi driver's life. That wasn't enough, and he took another taxi driver's life. Victor then went on the run, but that's when he began getting haunted by his victims. Ghosts of his victims would appear in his dreams, and according to Victor, began slapping him while he slept. Victor Amawuga could not sleep for days. Eventually, he told a friend about what he did, and Victor's friend quickly called the police. Victor was arrested and soon confessed. He expressed remorse but was sentenced to life in prison. But in prison, Victor warned other inmates to not repeat their crimes. He warned them that if they took people's lives, they may be haunted by the victims' ghosts. Just like what was happening to Victor even behind bars. First, we have to look at the White Widow. This is Samantha Lewthwaite. For much of her life, she was a normal British girl. But this all changed when she met Jermaine Lindsay. After marrying Jermaine Lindsay, Samantha changed her religion. She also changed everything about her life and became cut off from her family. But in 2005, Samantha's husband Jermaine did the unthinkable. He carried out one of the worst attacks of all time. This was the London bombings. 56 people lost their lives and over 700 were injured. This was after bombs exploded on many trains and buses. At first, Samantha talked to the media and said she knew nothing about this. She claimed to be shocked by what her husband had done, but it was later found this was all an act. Samantha had been instrumental in planning this attack, but before she could be arrested, she fled to Kenya with a fake passport. Since then, she's been known by the nickname the White Widow. She is wanted by Interpol, the CIA, MI6, and MI5. But to this day, she's still a fugitive on the run. Over the years, she's been behind many big attacks all over the world. This includes grenade attacks at many places of worship, an attack on a bar in Kenya in 2012, and an attack on a shopping mall also in Kenya. She's been known to fund and plan attacks all over the world. She's a member of the radical militant group Al-Shabaab. The group is based in Somalia, where it's believed Samantha lives today. The weird thing is, she had a normal upbringing. She was raised in a Christian house in the UK, but somehow took a dark path and is now one of the most wanted women in the world. Moving on, we have to look at Eileen Wuornos. This lady may look like an innocent woman, but in the 1970s, she took 7 people's lives. She got away with this for a long time because back then no one thought a woman could be a serial killer. She would take these men's lives with a firearm, and then get rid of their bodies in Florida swamps. She would also steal their belongings and sell them in pawn shops, which is eventually how she was caught thanks to fingerprints. Eileen's crimes were so evil she was sentenced to capital punishment. Eileen had had a crazy life. Her father had gone to prison for terrible crimes, and inside had taken his own life. On the outside world, Eileen got involved in narcotics, and she became pregnant at the age of only 14. She then became an armed robber, but after some time, it seems this woman simply snapped. That was when she began to take many men's lives. Eileen said that she did all of this in self-defense, but she was found guilty for taking the 7 lives, and in 2002 was taken out by a lethal injection. To this day, she is said to be one of the scariest women to ever live. Now we have to look at Tamara Samsonova. This woman from Russia looks like an innocent old grandmother, and that's exactly why she got away with her crimes for so long. She is known as the Granny Ripper. Over 15 years, she took over 13 lives. She is currently 75 years old. For a long time, she was married, but in 2000, her husband mysteriously disappeared. It's now believed that she took her husband's life. After her husband disappeared, Tamara began renting out a room in her apartment. But each time a new tenant came to her apartment, they would go missing. It turned out Tamara had been poisoning all of these men. Men would rent the room at the apartment only to be poisoned by Tamara. She also took various women's lives as well. Tamara would get rid of her victims' bodies in a very obvious way. She would simply throw the parts in nearby ponds and roads. One day, a body part of one of her victims was found near her apartment. Police then searched every single apartment in her building, and when they went into her bathroom, they found blood. They immediately arrested Tamara and did a forensic analysis. This linked her to more than 13 murders. Inside her apartment, police also found her diary. On one of the pages, she had written, "I killed my tenant Volodya, cut him to pieces in the bathroom with a knife, and then put the pieces of his body into plastic bags and threw them away." It's creepy to think such an innocent-looking woman would be so evil. She also admitted that she cut the head off one of her victims, and then boiled it in a saucepan. Surveillance footage even caught her with the exact saucepan she did this with. Next, we have to look at Diana Lovejoy. This woman from San Diego was arrested after trying to take the life of her husband. Diana and her boyfriend conspired to take the life of her husband, Greg. They were in the middle of a divorce which clearly got very ugly. Thankfully, Greg survived an attempt on his life. But Diana was sentenced to 26 years to life in prison. But when this guilty verdict was read out, she was clearly shocked.
Alright, we're going to need to take a break.
Diana literally fainted from hearing this. But really, what did she expect for plotting to take the life of her own husband? Moving on, we have to look at Irina Gardamarchuk. Irina Gardamarchuk is known as Russia's worst ever female serial killer. Over 10 years, this evil woman took so many lives. And her being a woman actually helped her a lot. She escaped police for so long because they were convinced the person responsible for these deaths was a man. They never expected it would be this woman who was married with 2 kids. But Irina would take many elderly people's lives, and then steal all of their possessions. She is known as the Monster of Krasnofinsk. She began her evil spree when she helped an elderly woman with shopping bags cross the road. She was invited back to the elderly woman's apartment, but that's when she whacked the old woman with a vase and stole $20. After this, Irina became addicted to taking lives. She would walk around the streets with a hammer in her handbag, taking the lives of 17 people. She was only caught in 2010 when one of her victims survived. Irina was immediately arrested and was sentenced to 20 years in prison where she remains today. Moving on, let's look at Karla Homolka. In 1993, this woman helped her husband take 2 women's lives, one of those women being Karla's very own sister. But a scary truth was later revealed. The 2 women were only the tip of the iceberg. It turned out Karla had been helping her serial killer husband, Paul Bernardo, for many years. Paul Bernardo was sentenced to life in prison, and Karla Homolka was sentenced to 12 years in prison for her role in these killings. Some say she got off way too light. Finally, we have to look at Mayuki Ishikawa. Did you know that one of the worst serial killers of all time was a woman? Mayuki from Japan actually took the 4th most lives out of any serial killer ever. She was a midwife who worked at a hospital, but while working at the hospital she took many babies' lives. In total, she took 211 lives. But bizarrely, she was only sentenced to 4 years in prison. Japan is famous for being very light on killers. She has been called the most evil woman in history. Mayuki passed away in 1987, aged 90, and at the time, she was a free woman. Somali pirates have turned East Africa's seas into the world's most dangerous waters. The most feared Somali pirate of all time is a man named Abduwali Muse. But to understand why Abduwali is so feared, we have to go back to 2009. On April 9th, 2009, the cargo ship Maersk Alabama was sailing through the pirate-infested Indian Ocean. They were 275 miles off the coast of Somalia. They were carrying 17,000 tons of cargo to Mombasa, Kenya. But that's when the ship's captain, Richard Phillips, sees something that sends a chill down his spine. There is an alarming blip on the ship's radar, and it's fast approaching the Maersk Alabama. Captain Phillips and his crew grab binoculars, and that's when they see it. There are 4 pirates in a speedboat, and they're approaching fast. An alarm is sounded on the ship, and everyone knows that an attack is imminent. The pirates zoom past the Maersk Alabama, and then double back to match the ship's speed. The inevitability sinks into the crew, and they realize that their biggest fear is about to come true. Their ship is going to be hijacked for ransom by Somali pirates. The pirates throw a grappling hook onto the ship. In just 5 minutes, pirates are climbing aboard the Maersk Alabama. The pirates range from ages 18 to 15 years old. Despite them being much younger than the ship's crew, this does not matter. The ship's crew is unarmed, but the Somali pirates all have AK-47s. Captain Phillips plays a final message over the ship's PA system. The 23 crew members can do nothing but listen, as Captain Richard Phillips says pirates have boarded the ship. I repeat, pirates have boarded the ship. 2 pirates board the main deck. They spray bullets into the air, while the other 2 pirates stay on the speedboat. The ship's third mate, Colin Wright, quickly calls an anti-piracy command center. It's basically 911, but for the sea. Colin tells the man on the phone that the ship has been boarded by pirates. All the phone operator replies with is, "Oh, sh*." The pirates enter the control area where Captain Phillips is. They hold lots of the crew hostage with AK-47s. The pirates force Captain Phillips to slow the ship down so the other 2 pirates can climb aboard. Of course, Captain Phillips has no choice but to oblige. The pirates ask the crew where they're from, and that's when the crew says they are a US vessel. As soon as the pirates find out they've hijacked a US ship, they begin to celebrate. They're expecting a big payday. That's because US companies and the US government often pays hijackers a lot of money, and US dollars are worth a lot of money in Somalia. The pirates then tell Captain Phillips to tell everyone to come to the ship's bridge. So he gets on the PA system and does this. He tells all crew to come to the bridge, but the crew don't appear. They know Captain Phillips is simply stalling. That's because Captain Phillips never gives the all-clear password. The pirates have now been waiting 5 minutes and there's still no sign of the crew. They begin to get agitated. But that's when the entire ship goes dark. The ship's power has gone out. That's because deep in the belly of the ship is engineer Mike Perry. Mike Perry has taken command of the ship and turned off all of the electronics on board. One of the pirates realizes that the crew's engineers are down in the ship's belly. So one of the pirates tells a crew member to guide him down into the ship's belly. He wants to get the other crew members onto the ship's bridge. That way the pirates have all of their hostages in one place. The crew member obliges with the pirate, but convinces him to leave his AK-47 before going into the ship's belly. He says the crew won't come out if they know you're armed. Reluctantly, the pirate agrees. He goes into the ship's belly with the crew member unarmed. He has no idea that waiting down below is engineer Mike Perry, and Mike Perry has a large knife. The pirate and the crew member go down into the ship's belly with flashlights. Engineer Mike Perry soon hears them coming, so he lays in wait in order to ambush the pirate. The pirate walks by and Mike Perry grabs him. Because the pirate is unarmed, Mike Perry can jump on him. He holds his knife in hand, but does not have to use it. Mike Perry and the other engineers then tie up the pirate. What they didn't realize was this pirate was the ringleader of all of the pirates. His name was Abduwali Muse, and he was known in the country for being one of the most ruthless pirates in the world. By this time, the US Navy has been notified of the hijacking, and they immediately began planning on what they can do. The military decides to deploy their secret weapon, the Navy SEALs. The Navy SEALs are trained for very intense situations, just like this one. But it will be a while before the Navy get there, as they're 300 miles away. Back on the Maersk Alabama, the ship crew are still terrified. One of the pirates have been captured by the crew, but 3 remain on board the ship with AK-47s in hand. Chief Engineer Mike Perry is still hiding out in the engine room. Over the radio, he is listening in to what's happening on the ship's bridge. He can hear the other 3 pirates getting increasingly angry at Captain Phillips. They're also asking where their leader, Abduwali Muse, is, not knowing that he's with the crew in the engine room. The crew now have a hostage of their own, and it's the pirates' leader. The crew are so angry they want to take Abduwali Muse's life, but they realize they can use him as a bargaining chip. Soon, the pirates learn that Muse has been captured by the crew. They tell Captain Phillips this. That's when Captain Phillips has a very brave and selfless idea. He makes the pirates an offer. They can take him as a hostage on a lifeboat and leave the ship, and in exchange, the crew will give back Muse. The pirates take the deal. Muse and the pirates reunite and get on a lifeboat, but they take their only remaining hostage, Captain Phillips, with them. Captain Richard Phillips' life is now in the pirates' hands. As the pirates leave the ship, Chief Mate Shane Murphy snaps 3 incredible photos of the pirates. These are the only known photos of the pirates who are not Muse ever taken. The 4 pirates, including Muse, now have Captain Phillips at gunpoint, and they're on a lifeboat. The pirates now plan to take Captain Phillips onto the mainland. From there, they can still demand a hefty ransom. The crew is in total panic. They're on the Maersk, Alabama, but their ship's captain is on a lifeboat with 4 pirates heading to Somalia. Inside the lifeboat, the pirates' leader, Muse, is badly injured. His hand was cut by engineer Mike Perry when he was ambushed, and the cut on Muse's hand is beginning to get infected. Then for the men on the Maersk, Alabama, a welcome sight is seen. The USS Bainbridge is approaching them rapidly. The USS Bainbridge is a US Navy missile destroyer. It's there to rescue the crew. Aboard the Bainbridge are the highest trained US Navy SEALs. The Navy SEALs knew that the hard part starts now. They had to somehow rescue Captain Phillips from the lifeboat. The only problem was, on the lifeboat were 4 pirates armed with AK-47s. I've obtained real footage from the US Navy of their rescue mission. This is the lifeboat as it heads to the Somali coast. If the pirates got Captain Phillips ashore, then they could take him anywhere. That's when Captain Phillips sees an opportunity to make a break for it. He jumps off the lifeboat into the ocean, but it's no use. The USS Bainbridge is more than a half-mile away, and he is quickly recaptured by the pirates and taken back on board the lifeboat. The Navy don't want the lifeboat to get to the Somali coast, so the Navy does something unorthodox. They begin to use fire hoses to push the ship away from the coast. They then use a Navy helicopter and fly it over the lifeboat. This creates hurricane-force winds, and it means the lifeboat can't move around. But this is merely a stalling tactic, and it does nothing to rescue Captain Phillips. The pirates and Captain Phillips have now been on the lifeboat for 83 hours. The pirates are beginning to get desperate. They send a message to the Navy. They're asking for food and water, and also medical attention for their leader Abduwali Muse. The wound on his hand is getting worse and worse. This is the exact thing the Navy's hostage negotiators have been waiting for. The Navy SEALs say they will give them food and water in exchange for Muse coming aboard their ship. Muse knows this means he will be arrested by US authorities, but he realizes that if he doesn't do this, then the wound on his hand will get infected, and he will soon not be alive. Now Muse is aboard the US Bainbridge, but the 3 other pirates and Captain Phillips are still aboard the lifeboat. The US Navy realizes there's no other way. The SEAL team calls 3 snipers into place. 1 sniper per pirate on the lifeboat. The SEAL team will have to snipe all of the pirates simultaneously, but not hit Captain Phillips. Luckily, Captain Phillips was being smart. For the entire 86 hours, he stayed in the same spot on the lifeboat. 2 of the SEAL team snipers lock on to 2 of the pirates, but the 3rd sniper does not know the position of the 3rd pirate. Luckily, that's when the pirate's lifeboat runs out of fuel. The lifeboat is now moving around erratically because of the waves. That's when the 3rd pirate gets seasick and sticks his head out of the window. The 3 SEAL snipers must coordinate 3 simultaneous shots. They also need to make sure they're headshots. They don't want a situation where a pirate is injured and can still pull the trigger on their AK-47, ending Captain Phillips' life. As soon as the 3rd pirate puts his head out of the window to be seasick, the 3rd SEAL communicates. He says 2 words to the other SEAL snipers: "Target acquired." Like clockwork, the 3 snipers shoot their shots, and the 3 pirates go down. Captain Phillips can now be rescued from the lifeboat. Captain Phillips is brought home to the USA, and Abduwali Muse is also brought to the USA for trial. He is escorted by 2 Navy SEALs with their faces blurred out by the military. The military have never identified these Navy SEALs. That's because they could be in danger if people knew the nature of their job. It just shows how dangerous a person Abduwali Muse really is. Abduwali Muse is taken to New York. At the time, he was only 18 years old. On May 19th, 2009, a grand jury convicts Muse. He is found guilty of hijacking, kidnapping, and hostage-taking. The charges of piracy and possession of a machine gun are dropped in exchange for a guilty plea. Muse is sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. But as he leaves court, a shocking sight is seen. Muse appears to be laughing at the FBI. He shows absolutely no remorse and no fear. And this cements him as one of the most feared Somali pirates to ever live. Muse is currently being held at a maximum security prison in Indiana. It's believed he will be released in 2038. You have to hand it to Captain Phillips for his amazing bravery. He was able to get his crew members out of harm's way, while sacrificing his own safety. But in the end, no crew members of the Maersk Alabama were injured. None of the Navy SEALs were injured either. Out of the 4 hijackers, 3 were sniped by US Navy SEALs, and their ringleader was arrested and taken to prison. Leave me your thoughts in the comments section about what Captain Phillips did. Do you think he was being smart and brave, or was he being reckless? If you've made it this far, then thank you for watching. I've been Charlie and you've been awesome. There are some more videos you will love on screen right now. Leave me a like rating if you enjoyed. And if you haven't already, then what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Top 10s.